On April 2, 2025, President Donald Trump shocked global markets by announcing one of the most comprehensive tariff policies in modern American history. Just days ago, the White House unveiled a 10% baseline tariff on virtually all imports effective April 5. Custom tariffs on 60 worst offenders including China at 54%, Vietnam at 46%, and the EU at 20%. A dramatic 25% tariff on all foreign-made automobiles, effective immediately. Exemptions for Canada and Mexico, which face separate tariffs under previous executive orders. President Trump claims these measures will allow the United States to economically flourish. But will they? Today, we're answering the pivotal question: do tariffs actually work? To find out, we'll examine 5 recent major tariff implementations and their real economic impacts on both the countries that impose them and those that were targeted. Before we dive deeper, it's important to understand the complexity of this policy. Several key exemptions exist. The following goods will not be subject to the new tariffs: articles protected under national security laws, steel, aluminum and auto parts already subject to Section 232 tariffs, copper, pharmaceuticals, semiconductors, and lumber. Products that may become subject to future Section 232 tariffs: bullion, energy, and certain minerals not available in the United States. For Canada and Mexico, the situation is especially nuanced. Goods compliant with the USMCA trade agreement will continue to see 0% tariffs. Non-USMCA compliant goods face a 25% tariff. Non-USMCA compliant energy and potash face a 10% tariff. If the existing orders on fentanyl and migration are terminated, USMCA compliant goods would remain duty-free, while non-compliant goods would face a 12% tariff. These exemptions create a complex patchwork of rules that will significantly impact global supply chains and trade patterns. For those unfamiliar, a tariff is simply a tax imposed by one country on goods imported from another country. Think of it as a toll gate at the border. Foreign products have to pay to enter your market. Tariffs come in 2 main forms: ad valorem tariffs, which are a percentage of the import's value like Trump's new baseline of 10%, and specific tariffs, which are a fixed amount per unit, weight, or measure. Governments implement tariffs for various reasons, protecting domestic industries responding to unfair trade practices or raising revenue. But as we'll see from recent history, their effects are often complex and not always what policymakers expect. The most relevant precedent for today's announcement is the previous US-China trade war. In 2018, the United States imposed tariffs on Chinese goods, eventually covering $370 billion worth of imports with rates ranging from 7.5% to 25%. Many of these remain in place and are now being increased to 54% under the new policy. Studies from the Federal Reserve found that these tariffs reduced U.S. manufacturing employment by 1.4% and increased consumer prices by roughly 0.5%. Meanwhile, China accelerated efforts to become less dependent on U.S. markets. The Peterson Institute estimated American consumers and businesses paid approximately $80 billion in additional costs due to these tariffs. In 2016, the European Union imposed anti-dumping tariffs on Chinese steel products with rates up to 73.7%. While these tariffs helped stabilize European steel producers in the short term, downstream industries faced higher input costs, and China simply redirected steel exports to other markets. Notably, under Trump's new policy, steel already subject to Section 232 tariffs is exempt from the new baseline tariff, suggesting recognition that layering tariffs may not produce additional benefits. In 2018, the U.S. imposed a 25% tariff on steel and 10% on aluminum imports, citing national security concerns, similar to the justification for the new 25% automobile tariff. While domestic steel production increased briefly, manufacturing employment actually declined by 1.4% due to higher input costs. The tariffs saved approximately 1,000 steel jobs, but cost roughly 75,000 jobs in industries using steel. The exemption of semiconductors and pharmaceuticals from the new tariffs suggests lessons learned about protecting critical supply chains without raising costs for essential goods. So how long might we expect Trump's new tariffs to remain in place? The data shows significant variation. Temporary safeguard tariffs are officially limited to 4 years under WTO rules. Anti-dumping tariffs last 5 to 10 years on average, with reviews every 5 years. Retaliatory tariffs last 2 to 3 years on average, often resolved through negotiations. Long-term protective tariffs, well, some last decades, becoming essentially permanent. Despite often being announced as temporary measures, tariffs frequently outlive their original purpose. According to World Bank data, the average tariff measure remains in place for approximately 7.3 years. In 2019, India imposed a massive 200% tariff on Pakistani goods following diplomatic tensions. This case demonstrates how tariffs can function as geopolitical tools rather than purely economic ones, a dynamic we see in Trump's policy, with the dramatically different rates applied to different countries, and the special arrangements for Canada and Mexico tied to migration and fentanyl concerns. In 2020, China imposed targeted tariffs on Australian goods, including 80.5% on barley, 212% on wine, and 12 to 35% on beef. While initially devastating for specific industries, Australia successfully diversified many exports to new markets. The exemption of energy and minerals not available in the US from Trump's new tariffs suggests an understanding that certain strategic imports can't be readily replaced by domestic production. A lesson from experiences like this one. Based on these historical examples, what might we expect from Trump's sweeping new tariffs? Likely short-term effects. U.S. companies importing goods will face immediate higher costs. Consumer prices are likely to rise across various sectors, except for exempted goods. U.S. automobile manufacturers may see a temporary competitive advantage. Global supply chains already under stress will face further disruption. Trading partners, especially the EU and China, are likely to implement retaliatory tariffs. USMCA-compliant goods from Canada and Mexico will continue to flow freely. Countries with lower tariff rates like the UK, Brazil, and Australia may see trade advantages. Potential long-term effects: acceleration of friend-shoring to countries with favorable tariff rates. Manufacturing reshoring to the US is possible but not guaranteed. Further fragmentation of global trade into regional blocs. Inflation pressures in the US economy, mitigated somewhat by strategic exemptions. Potential WTO challenges from multiple countries. Increased importance of trade agreement compliance, particularly USMCA. So, returning to our central question, do tariffs work? The evidence from recent history suggests a nuanced answer. Tariffs can provide short-term protection for specific industries. They typically impose broader economic costs that outweigh the benefits. They often lead to retaliation that harms exporters. They rarely solve fundamental economic challenges. Trump's new tariff policy shows some evolution in thinking with strategic exemptions for critical goods like semiconductors and pharmaceuticals, and special provisions for energy and minerals not available domestically. These carve-outs suggest recognition that tariffs work best when applied selectively rather than universally. As these sweeping new tariffs take effect, Americans should prepare for economic turbulence in the short term. History suggests that while some domestic industries may benefit, consumers and many businesses will bear significant costs. Whether these tariffs work ultimately depends on one's definition of success. If the goal is protecting specific industries regardless of broader economic impacts, they may succeed. If the goal is overall economic growth and prosperity, the historical evidence suggests caution. Thanks for watching By the Data. Please subscribe and join us as we track the initial market reactions to these historic tariff changes. Until then, keep thinking critically about the global economy.